Hello and welcome to More Tea Minister. My name is Ian. Today we are looking at three teas, three oolongs. They're all from North Vietnam. They're all from Moc Chau, and that's why you'll note from the thumbnail they're all called Moc Chau oolongs. And what we have is three teas all based in the Qing Xin cultivar, all from a terroir which is effectively brand new to us, northern Vietnam. So what they have in common is the terroir and the cultivar in question, because it's Qing Xin. And we have one version which is, let's call it the template version. I've been trying to think of the right word because I'm not trying to infer there is something inferior about the tea, but this is the Green Heart minimal oxidation and minimal, if any, baking, and it's Moc Chau Green Heart Oolong. And the second tea we're looking at today is to take those base parameters and tweak them slightly by allowing the tea to undergo a higher degree of oxidation. So that leaves us with Moc Chau Red Buffalo Oolong. And then to conclude the trio, we have a higher, well, not necessarily a higher degree of roasting, but we've got a heavy degree of roasting. And so we have Moc Chau Dragon Breath Oolong, which is a fantastic name. And so for each of these three teas from Curious Tea, we're going to look at the packaging, look at the tea inside, thankfully do the two steepings of the three teas simultaneously. So first steeping for all three teas, and then second steeping for all three teas, and then three Gongfu sessions. So this is going to be a long video, hopefully rewarding for all that. I'll see you for our close-up of the packaging in just a moment. This is the first of three northern Vietnamese oolongs, Moc Chau, based on the Qing Xin cultivar. This is from Curious Tea, as are the two others. So this one is Moc Chau Green Heart Oolong, signifying it's Qing Xin. We also have Moc Chau Dragon Breath Oolong and Red Buffalo Oolong, which we're going to take a look at in their own videos. Hopefully the lighting here is good enough that you can see the hopefully now typical colour scheme utilised by Curious Tea. We have a symbol of a dragon up here in green, which is part of the Vietnamese symbology, and this particular kind of boat, and in the background here you can see those, I can't remember which James Bond movie it is, where they had James hunting somebody through these fascinating, almost sort of broken teeth islands. We have the brewing parameters down here. Those are relatively straightforward. A single word flavour profile is floral. The relevant point here is a light floral oolong from northern Vietnam, crafted from a Qing Xin cultivar. Tightly rolled leaves produce a delicate liqueur with a floral aroma. The smooth character is floral, vegetal, and creamy notes with a clean, lightly sweet aftertaste. So at that basic level, we're looking at something that, apart from the terroir effects, is the standard kind of flavour profile of a Qing Xin. So we're now going to take a look at the tea inside. This is the last of our trio of Vietnamese oolongs from Curious Tea, all based on the Qing Xin cultivar. This is Moc Chau Red Buffalo Oolong. This is a complex oolong, I'm just reading the notes, that undergoes a higher degree of oxidation, resulting in a tea that has a malty black tea character with still some of those lighter floral attributes. The taste is warming and smooth with fruity notes of sweet raisins and wild honey. Just to go over once again the symbolism, which I do love in Curious Tea's packaging. These flowers here are in a different colour scheme. We've got this dragon over here to symbolise Vietnam, and we've got this boat and those characteristic islands in the back. We've also got this blue colour scheme in the leaf here for saying oolong, and here to signify that we're dealing with an oolong. So once again, it's colour and it's also symbol. And this one goes back to the Moc Chau Green Heart in that it's a May harvest. So let's take a look at the tea inside. This is Curious Tea's Moc Chau Dragon Breath Oolong. And in this video, we are looking at a tea that is different to the Moc Chau Green Heart because it's been tweaked in one direction. And here we have one that's been heavily roasted. The flavour profile signifies roasted very distinctly. It's late summer harvest, it's in September, whereas the Moc Chau Green Heart was in May. So this is a heavily roasted Vietnamese oolong crafted from a Qing Xin cultivar. Twisted leaves produce an amber cup with a roasted aroma. The brisk flavour has a warming roasted character with light caramel notes and a smooth, tangy aftertaste. So now we're not looking at a boiled oolong, we're looking at a heavily roasted and twisted one. So let's take a look at the tea inside. Here we are looking at the Moc Chau Green Heart Oolong leaves. As is fairly typical for oolong, these leaves have been processed into what I call tea beads, or just they've been balled up. The tea beads themselves, the size is, there are some very large ones here, maybe knocking on past half a mil towards a centimetre, half a centimetre towards a full centimetre, with quite a bit of variety. There's some down to the 2 or 3 millimetre level. Colour-wise, predominantly dark forest green. The stem material is a light brown colour, and that's fairly prominent, as hopefully you can see as well. I think that sometimes indicates which season, or at least what altitude the leaves grow at, because that gives them a stronger stalk, I believe. And I think there is some green edging to some of these tea beads. The smell of the leaf reminds me actually of the Thai oolong varietal that we looked at, which was of course a green heart as well. It's fruity, sweet, and there is a slight creamy note. I was going to say there's also an astringent note, but I think it actually does such a strong perfume kind of fruitiness. So you are picking up the kind of classic Qing Xin or green heart scent profile. So now let's take a look at the next of our teas. This is the Moc Chau Red Buffalo Oolong Beads of Tea, the bold tea leaves. The appearance of the leaves here is hopefully somewhat different to the Green Heart Oolong. The tea beads are significantly smaller, and perhaps because they are smaller, they are more uniform. I don't see many that are approaching, let's say, half a centimetre, let alone exceeding it. They are significantly darker. There's no green at all, but I'm not seeing any sort of reddish tinge, except I think the stem material might have picked up some slightly reddish tinges. Instead, we just got very dark tea beads. They're not quite as dark as I anticipate the roasted tea to appear. However, we have got significantly darker tea beads, a more relatively average size that's consistent, and the scent profile is interesting. There's still a fruity element, but it's slightly muted. It's still sweet, and I think there's a slight sugary hint to that as well. Very interesting, and I'm looking forward to trying this tea along with the others when we get to that point. Now we're going to take a look at the heavily roasted version, the Moc Chau Dragon Breath. Here we are looking at the Moc Chau Dragon Breath Oolong. The first most obvious difference is that these leaves have not been balled, they have been twisted. So it reminds me of, well, a lot of black teas almost. The scent of the leaves is the first thing I noticed, because it's really quite a strong roaster note, and it's so perfumey that it actually smells a little of like a fruit ester smell, like a pear drop, not because of the fruity notes, but because of that perfumey smell of volatiles. The appearance of the leaves is pretty uniform. These leaves are about 2.5 centimetres, an inch long, maybe a couple of mils wide, predominantly black, but with some not even patchy paler coloured leaves, but some leaves that are simply a pale brown colour altogether. Whether that's stalk material or otherwise, I'm not sure of. However, that's a really fascinating smell, and I'm curious to know how that manifests itself in the tasting. which is what we're going to come to now. See you in a mo. Here we are looking at our 3 teas for their first steeping. I have on my left the Moc Chau Green Heart Oolong, that's the minimal, if any, baking and minimal oxidation. In the middle, we have upped the oxidation for the Moc Chau Red Buffalo Oolong. And on my right, we have the Moc Chau Dragon Breath, which is the heavily roasted version. In terms of brewing parameters, they've all got the same water temperature, 90 degrees, and it's the same tea to water ratio of 1 gram per, excuse me, per 100 mils. So in each case, it's about 320 mils. The difference is that for the Green Heart and for the Dragon Breath, the timing was 3.5 minutes, and for the Red Buffalo, it was 2.5 minutes. Now, in terms of the appearance of the teas, I'm glad I've managed to keep these in the right order, at least for the first two, because it would be very hard, I would say, to be able to tell the difference between the oxidized and the unoxidized. Appearance-wise, they are pretty much identical. A nice but pale yellow-green colour. The roasted version has picked up more of a brass colour. I think you can maybe catch that there. Yeah, there you go. Now, in terms of the aroma, the Green Heart version has very rich, very inviting aroma. There's certainly cream there. There's plenty of fruit there. I'm not sure I pick up any florals. Oh, actually, I do. There's fruit and florals. There's something perfumey and floral in the background. Now, the scent of or the aroma of the more oxidized version, there is some red fruit, some oxidation, slight bit of cocoa-y, tannic edge to it, but more on the fruit, I would think, than pushing towards the cocoa. As you can see, it doesn't look radically different in terms of oxidation. In fact, only when I put them between in the middle of the 3, do you see any kind of extra yellow on the oxidized version. It's not even a more red color. Now, what's the aroma like on the baked version? Wow, that comes across as very fruity, but very well baked, very thoroughly baked. I don't mean well as if I could judge the quality of the baking, but extensively baked. And it does say heavily roasted, but it's kept florals, and there is a smoothness, maybe cream to it as well. So really what I'd like to know is what's the base note or base notes like? How is Qing Xin like in keeping minimal oxidation and roasting, but in a North Vietnamese terroir? And then what does oxidation and then roasting do to that sort of base taste? So what we're going to do is we're going to move these from one cup to another, and we'll see what the Green Heart version is like. Light to medium body. Those are pretty good parameters. The flavour is dropping off slightly, so you could perhaps get away with, a longer steeping time seems unwise, so maybe either slightly more tea or to use a slightly higher temperature. But there's something that is lingering, not on the palate, but almost up here in behind my nose. So it's a lingering aroma is what I'm saying. But medium body, there's fruit there, there's cream there, but not as intense as I feel it could be, but still very interesting. So let's see what the oxidized version is like. And once again, we'll move that from cup to cup. Because if this has any kind of red fruit, I mean, there's something definitely fruity there. Yes. How's those for parameters? Once again, you feel as if the flavour is dropping off ever so slightly. So you could tweak something, but generally speaking, that's pretty good. You're certainly, the tea is getting a chance to shine. That's really interesting, because the one thing I've noticed only by sampling the second one is something that continues on from the first. There's a slight stewed apple or stewed fruit quality, slightly not tart, but rich. And it's, as I say, you only really notice it when you have the two side by side. I'm going to try a bit more of that. See if I can put my finger on what I'm getting at. Yeah, there is right at the end there, there's something, either a tang or a spiciness, I'm not quite sure which. It's not astringent in the way that the Santikiri from Thailand had a real astringency. It's nothing like that. But there's something just bringing up the sweetness and the fruit, and that makes me think of stewed fruit. I think it might be a slight spiciness, and it's there in the Green Heart version as well. So let's see. That really is lovely. Let's see how the baking affects this base parameter as well. Oh, that's really good. The baking comes through first, but there's masses of fruit with it. And it is a sort of baked fruit pudding. That's really, really, really nice. And funnily enough, and again, as with the middle one and the first, there is a strong aroma lingering behind. That doesn't usually happen. It's usually down here on the palate, but it's really the aroma that's lingering. And again, that slightly fruity, spicy edge. That's what the baking is bringing out. It really is a sort of fruit ester aspect. And maybe that's where the spicy element is coming in, because it's not a pure fruit. It does have a tang and estery volatile quality. That is absolutely fantastic. And that one is from September. Oh, it's creamy and it's fruity and it's ester-esque. So yes, there is definitely something that's coming across. The cream, the Qing Xin aspects of floral and cream. There's floral on the Green Heart version. There's a lot of fruit in all of them. But what's coming across, and what I assume is maybe a terroir situation, is that ester, spice, fruit aspect, the thing that's giving it a tang that means it isn't just sweetened fruit. And in the roasted version, it's coming out in a kind of baked fruit quality, as if you were baking a fruit crumble and then throwing in pear drops. In terms of the oxidized version, it's a very mild oxidation. It's certainly bringing in a red fruit quality. Let's try that once more. There is some red fruit, no drying. But yes, now that I've tried the roasted, it is ester. That's what that spicy fruity element is. It's like a fruit ester. And I'm going to go back one more time, and I know this makes the video a bit long because we haven't even done the second steeping, but we'll be quicker. Yeah, I can smell it on the cup. I could do with these two being a bit stronger. or the flavour lingering, but that ester quality is coming through all of them. That's absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to put this one, the roasted, to one side to drink, which, as you will know, is a good sign. And we will see how these teas fare on their second steeping. See you in a moment. Here we are with our second steeping of our 3 teas. The Moc Chau Green Heart Oolong, the Moc Chau Red Buffalo Oolong, and the Moc Chau Dragon Breath. Minimal oxidation and or baking, higher oxidation, higher roasting if there is indeed any on the first one. Now the first thing I've noticed is that whereas I would say the baked version is slightly less obviously different in colour, the middle one, the higher oxidation, has definitely got a darker colour than the base template, as it were. So let's take a look at those two to start with. Whereas they were pretty indistinguishable on the first steeping, that's not the case here. The higher oxidation has a much more pronounced yellow colour. In fact, it's become more intense, whereas I think the other one, I don't think it's less intense, I think it's stayed the same. Certainly the leaves for the higher oxidation one were a bit more resilient to the steeping, and they were still pretty leathery when I checked on them, whereas now they pretty much unfurled and steeped properly. The colour of the baked one, I think that's paler. I would have said it was bronze, whereas that's more of a brass colour, maybe slightly darker, but certainly not as intense, whereas the middle one is definitely more intense. Let's try the aroma of the Green Heart. There is still a perfumey, fruity note, and still there is a stewed fruit aspect to it, not astringent, not tart, but there is something there that makes the fruit element quite complex, put it that way. In terms of the higher oxidation, now I would say the red fruit, obvious sort of this has been oxidized aroma is more intense as well. That's good. Still incredibly well balanced though. You haven't got a sort of sharp tannic edge, but it isn't a black tea. I suppose that I'm trying to desperately to keep the cat out of the frame here. And in terms of the aroma of the roasted, sorry, that's the camera bouncing because the cat isn't happy with me. Interestingly, the slightly attenuated or damped down roasted note has allowed the sort of fruit ester quality to shine or to become more apparent. So that's definitely come through on this second steep as well. I'm trying to, has it come through? Yeah, there is an edge. There is that sort of fruit ester aspect that's present in all 3 on the aroma anyway. So let's move on to see how that comes across in the taste. Let's start with the green oolong. Stewed fruit. Very smooth. Flavors dropped off about the same. It hasn't lost any intensity. Slightly less body, naturally enough, I suppose. Fruity and a little darker. Definitely comes across as cooked fruit, if not stewed. I'm not saying it has to be plums or rhubarb with something astringent, but definitely a sort of cooked fruit smell or taste. In terms of the higher oxidation, still too hot. Blimey, this seems to be keeping its heat today. I would say it's got the cooked fruit aspect of the Green Heart. Same light to medium body, but it's definitely gained in red fruit quality. That's interesting, as if it's cooked red fruit. It's not overly strong, it's not the most potent, you can tell by the colour. But there's, I love that really well balanced fruit. And the flavour's dropping off less. It really needed that second steeping. So let's try, I wonder whether the solution would be keep the temperature, but maybe even keep the Green Heart and the Dragon Breath as is, but extend the steeping time for the Red Buffalo. So here we are with the heavily roasted version. Still some of it's coming through. The roasted quality, that is. Fascinating. I beg your pardon, cooked fruit coming through, but this time with that slightly roasted edge. So you've got, in the higher oxidation, the stewed fruit has a red fruit, red curranty, cherry kind of taste. In the oxidized, it's back to a more anonymous stewed fruit, but it's definitely got a baked quality. I'm just going to double check that the unoxidized or the low oxidation version, the base template, whether it's still got that cooked fruit. It does on the nose. Yes. So you've got cooked fruit, maybe that loses that estery edge on a second steeping. Cooked fruit, cooked red fruit, roasted red fruit. I think that's what's carried through. And the light to medium body, smoothness in all three, so I think the creaminess has come through as well on the texture. So a very good showing. And my mouth and my nostrils, my sinuses, they're just full of a sort of fruity aroma. That's wonderful. Okay, let's move on to our first, and we'll make them quick, I promise, our first Gongfu of 3, heaven help us, which is going to be for the Green Heart. Back in a moment. Hello and welcome to the first of our 3 Gongfu sessions to conclude our video. And for the first one, we are looking at the Moc Chau Green Heart Oolong. That's the sort of template version with the minimal oxidation and minimal, if any, baking. The brewing parameters, I've kept the water at 90 degrees, same temperature as it was for the Western. Temperature seemed to work okay, and we're going with 3 grams of tea per 50 mils of water. So that's a fairly standard ratio for our Gaiwan sessions, our Gongfu sessions. Sorry for the noise. Other than that, I have my stopwatch to note how long the steepings are and a notepad to record them, and a wastewater jug off to one side. Everything is being preheated so we can begin. Yeah, the beads are some big beads in there, but it's the stalk material that really stands out as to how large it is. So we'll check in on this after about 35, 40 and see where we're going. That was a bit drastic. Didn't see any popping, but I'd rather just get the lid on. An interesting question I've been asking myself is, as we get into 2026, is how many of the teas I've tasted do I want to try again in their 2026 iteration, or even their 2025, or which particular harvest. And it's worth doing because I've taken a note, coming up to 40. Chicken at 40. A little bit of fruit there. How many teas I would have to review if I did all the ones that I've reviewed so far in their next year's iteration, plus other interesting ones, and it's a lot. It's a lot of videos and a lot of tea. So we'll call, and we'll do that for a minute, I think. Actually, it's going to be 1 minute 5 by the time I'm done. There we go. That might accelerate proceedings. So there we are, 465. There's a little bit of fruit and a little bit of astringency, but nothing too drastic. Tartness rather than outright astringency. We've got a white tea silvery colour there. At least, hopefully you're picking... Yeah, there you go. You're picking it up as well. A bit of creaminess has come through already. A bit of perfume and a bit of cream. That's about it. At least on the aroma. What's the aroma like on the cup? Much the same. Light to medium, a lot of cream, lots of cream. Flavour dropping off. In fact, it is basically just cream, but very nice. Okay, let's see what we have to do to get to any fruit in this tea. Let's take a look at the beads. Bone dry, virtually bone dry, very little give. Even the stalk material, compared to how much stalk is evident in the dried form, it hasn't really expanded, so it's definitely going to need longer. Certainly did on the second steeping was needed for this tea to really flourish. So let's do the same again. Yeah, you can actually see the stalk material expanded. So yes, I was saying, take a note of how many teas. I'd like to try all of the teas to see how they're coming on, but it's not practical, and not all of the teas. There's been very few teas I haven't enjoyed in some measure. In fact, there's only maybe 2, and even in some instances there might be others where it's just been felt like the game's not worth the candle. But I might have to be a bit more rigorous in which ones go by the wayside. So coming up to 45 seconds. Much the same. Right, I think it's going to need a full minute and 5 again. In fact, I'm just going to get ahead of myself and put that. Don't fidget. We'll try it to minute 5. There we go. Stewed fruit. Still nothing really very distinctive coming through there. Sorry. At least one of the leaves has just really unfolded. Some of them are still bone dry, some of them are sort of leathery. So I wonder if it's the smaller ones that have, I presume it's the smaller ones that have managed to expand. The colour's a little more intense and moved into that pale yellow meets silvery colour. There's some fruit on the nose this time. Slightly less cream. And that's how it is. It's sweet and cream. Again, not even really fruity. And again, yeah, it's sweet and cream with a bit of fruit maybe. Yeah, some of these beads, yeah. Some of them are just about there and others aren't. We need a bit more water just to cover them this time. So probably about 60 mils there. There's nothing drying yet, but I fear with this tea, the difficulty is going to be catching up between when it becomes drying and over steeped and getting to the point where the flavours come out. I'm going to put the temperature up to 95. We need a final steeping. That might be able to bring the temperature, bring the steeping time down. That was 60 mils, as I say. Let's try it at 45. Maybe stewed fruit, but again, pretty indistinct. We could probably push to that minute 5 just because of the extra water. In fact, we're going to push to a minute 10. Let's avoid any ambiguity. See what that gets us. Again, pretty indistinct, has to be said. Maybe a higher temperature will help. Oh, some of these tea beads are so big, they're still locked in. If I show you this one's obviously been made of at least 2 leaves and 3, and they've just simply not really come out of their bead form yet, so we'll definitely need another steep. More definitely out of silver altogether into pale yellow now. Sweet, maybe slightly fruity. So we've lost cream, at least on the aroma. No, the cream's still there with the taste, but not in the aroma, it's mild. Yeah, the flavours, I'm not saying the flavours are muddy. But we're definitely going to need to up things here. So this is a higher temperature, 95. Well, that's probably about 70 mils, because they are slowly expanding, but they're really, really, really taking their time. But that's the nature of Gongfu, especially. You have to play it by ear. That isn't working. Why isn't it working? Is it just physics of leaves unfurling? Is it the wrong temperature for maximum steeping, etc., etc., etc.? And we are starting to get a slightly drying quality, so we're definitely having to overtake that to get to the flavour. And we know it's there. This is 50 seconds. No. Right, back to 1:05, 1 minute 5. There's a little bit more intensity there, but it's still a slightly tart stewed fruit quality. My goodness. Some of these beads are still having none of it, or at least they're nowhere near. That one's definitely unfurled to an extent, but you would think you were only on about a second steeping here. Colour-wise, a slightly more intense yellow colour. Now, slight vegetal note, some sweetness, bit of cream, but nothing fruity, nothing outright fruity. There's some there, mild. That needed 95 the whole way. It's got some cream back, but you can't push it for any longer because it is just going to hit the kind of over steeping threshold. Let me just take a quick note of that. Yeah. In retrospect, start that at 95, and I think you would get a much richer, fruitier aspect. It's definitely there. It just needs a higher temperature for the Gongfu. Then the Western was carrying some more flavour, but maybe even do that at 95. Definitely for the Gongfu. When you hit it there, which would be about, I reckon, maybe the second steep. If it was 95, that's from the start. Maybe the third. There's cream, there's fruit, there's sweet. It's a more kind of coherent flavour profile. So let's move on to our second Gongfu session. Back in a moment. Here we are for our second Gongfu session, this time for Moc Chau Red Buffalo. So this is the oxidized version of the tea. Slight change to the parameters, having learnt our lesson from the first one. Temperatures up to 95 degrees centigrade. I don't think, looking ahead, we'll do that for the, what's it called, the dragon breath. There was a fair bit of flavour coming through from the baked version, even at 90. In fact, the flavour dropped off, whereas with the others, it increased on the second steeping. So, other than that, should be much the same. 95 degrees centigrade, 3 grams of tea per 50 mils of water per steeping. Everything is pre-warmed, and I've been organised enough. Once again, it's not always true. Got my notepad and my stopwatch. So let's make a start. 95 degrees centigrade as a reminder for this one. There we go. And also, if we do it that way, we may not need 4 or 5 steepings, because if you've got 3 videos, sorry, I beg your pardon, 3 Gongfu sessions, that's going to make a video. That's going to make a video very, very long. And I don't know how YouTube feels about that, but I can't imagine any potential viewers are ecstatic about immensely long videos either. So we're coming up for, sorry, some of the drainage water is still there. I think we'll check in at 45. Hopefully we get some breadfruit. Little bit of fruit, but again, these are very resilient tea beads. So we're going to have to give them a minute 5, I think. Push them over the minute. Make them, maybe take them to a minute 10 even, let's have a see. I think so. So a minute 10. So, yes, now that's made the difference. There is a little bit of that higher oxidation, kind of cocoa-y quality there. That's very good. We're getting some difference. The beads are, yeah, they're still very dry. The stalk, as always, the stalks are rehydrating, but the stalk is very slender stuff. I don't know if you can even see it. So, yeah, still very tight beads. Colour-wise, oh, that's a gorgeous gold colour. Just straight up gold, that's lovely. And it's fruity, kind of generic fruity, with a definite sort of oxidized smell, that's slightly tannic, slightly cocoa-y quality, but only slight. It's very well balanced. Let's see how that comes out. First steep, but at a slightly higher temperature. Plenty of body. Slightly sweet. Gotta be careful, that's almost drying already. Wow. Okay. So, oh, they're definitely slightly hydrated in the steam. There's body there and some smoothness, but no distinct flavour, I don't think. Let's do that again. Okay. We have to be careful because oxidizing, and I don't know if baking does the same, but that can change the size of the leaves and the texture, as we've seen before. So sometimes leaves can stay leathery if they've been roasted, or they look different if they've been oxidized, not just in the color. So that can make you think that they haven't steeped properly, or they haven't steeped as much, and it's really just what the unfurled leaf is like. So this is coming to 45 for our second steeping. Something tart and fruity, but again, it's not a really coherent picture. I think we'll give that another minute 10. And then maybe, if that's steeped enough, we can bring it back. Minute 10. Again, muddy. Just nothing, apart from some sort of oxidation. You can tell it's been oxidized. There's nothing really coming through. That's moving from yellow into a pale brass colour. Again, it's a lovely colour. Oh, now there's fruit there. In fairness, on the jug, there's some fruit, some oxidation, almost a syrupy edge. Okay, that's very nice. And obviously sweet. Leave that to cool. So look at the leaves. Some of these beads are still rock solid, some are more tender, and the leaves are halfway unfurled. So body's increased, definitely sweeter. Some slight fruit. That slightly spicy edge is there. Great, that's good. Let's do our third steep. Now, right at the end, you could say that's a red fruit. That's good. Now that's interesting. That's the third steep. You still only need 50 mils. Whether that's just the size of the leaves once they've been oxidized, or, well, the beads are certainly a lot smaller. So, but and the drying quality is only slight. It's really what I'm lingering is a slight fruitiness, which is good. So we'll take a look in at 40, see where we are. This is 40. A little bit of fruit, but not much, I would say. I really don't want to oversteep it though. Maybe bring this in at a minute and push for the same for last steeping. Just again, once again, to avoid any sort of oversteeping quality. Again, just a slightly tart fruity edge. Colour-wise, yeah, you're definitely into brass colour there. That's interesting. Tart fruit, definitely a tart fruit. And the slightly spicy estery edge is there now. Yeah, that's good. Tea. Leaves are partially unfurled. Yeah, some of them are still not fully there. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to get on with our last steep. I'm sorry, we are going to do that again for a minute, and we'll see where that gets us. Maybe about 60 mils there. Right, what's the taste like on this third steep? Definitely fruity and very sweet. Oh wow, the body's really up. That's a nice sweet spot. It's quite an intense fruit. It's not red fruit, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. But it's working together, it's sweet, and there's fruit there, there's some oxidation. Okay, that one, it's really starting to paint a picture, if you want to put it that way. So let's give this one another up to a minute, and I think that should, if I was a betting man, I would say that was the sweet spot. Let's hope so. We've kept the drying at bay. Not much on the lid. Blimey, these teas have been very elusive on the lid. I would say the colour is the same as before. Still a nice brass colour. Yeah, you've got fruit, red fruit, slightly tart, but sweet. You could probably do at least one more just to get the leaves in full. We're not going to, don't worry, but you really could. In fact, let's just take a note of that. Yeah, let's let you see them. Helps if they don't fall out, but they are by no means filling the bottom of a... This is a small gaiwan. They're by no means filling the bottom of that. My goodness. Even 95 is pushing it. Oh, that's good, yes. Red fruit. Yeah, there's red fruit and sweetness and a darker edge there. So the body's actually about the same. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's the fruit coming in at the end. The problem with this one, with the Gongfu, is just as with the Green Heart, trying to get the flavour out of this tea whilst not pushing it too hard is not so easy. This one, even at 95, where... In fact, I'm going to open this lid so the kettle can cool down for the final steeping, the final Gongfu session. That last steeping, number 4 and number 3, we're starting to paint that picture, what you're wanting to bring out, the kind of smooth, creamy in that sense, texture, and the fruit, mixed with it obviously being a higher oxidation. But Gongfu, I think it's fair to say, even at the higher temperature, hasn't really brought out the best in these teas. So it may be a matter of Western being best. We'll see after our third video, our third part, our third Gongfu, which we'll move on to now. See you in a tick. Here we are in the final part of our video. I've lost count of what part it would be, our third and final Gongfu session, as we look at the heavily roasted version of this tea, Moc Chau Dragon Breath Oolong. I brought the water back down to 90 as these twisted rather than rolled leaves or balled leaves seemed much more responsive. And in fact, the second steeping had a lower intensity of flavour and colour, whereas the others actually picked up. So other than that, 90 degrees, 3 grams of tea, 50 mils per steeping, everything's pre-warmed. And I think we're ready to begin. I think I will rely on shorter, much more self-consciously sort of serial, narrow steepings for this. So we're going to take a look in at 25 and see where that gets us. Right, that's everything at least covered. It will require 1 shugel, I think. Oops. Sorry for any scraping noise. Let's see where we get at 25. Oh yeah, no more. I think we'll come in at 30. Not because I think there's a danger of oversteeping, but the roasted quality was already coming through. Roasted, but not simply roasted. It's hard to describe. It's amazing what comes through when a roasting. It's not always just about sweetness. There can be sort of what I suppose you would call savoury confectionery stuff, something like licorice, even aniseed, and there's something there that's more complicated than pure roasting. I suppose maybe that's roasting plus sweetness. The leaves are still dry, not even flexible, so that's good. We've still got a long way to go. That's jumped straight to brass, maybe even heading into bronze. It's sort of reddish brass. Roastedness, almost smoke, and some sweet. Okay. Again, a really complex array of aromas coming from that roasting. Medium body already. Flavours dropping off slightly. Lovely complementary set of flavours. Roastedness, bit of smokiness. Some smooth. Little bit of sweet. But the drying, ooh, that's already almost slightly drying, so I think we will need to be careful there. Again, just keep that at 30, I think. Maybe a touch more water. Let's take that to, that's about 70. See if that takes the edge off the drying. But again, we'll come in at 30, so we're not pushing too hard. Maybe, yes, okay. Now I'm talking to myself. Or I'm finishing my sentence off inside my head, which is never a good sign. A little bit smoother, a little bit less complex. The leaves have got some pliability now, but still, let me show you. They're not, they were pretty, they were filling the bottom of the gaiwan just because you can't pack them down neatly. They're starting to expand and in that way fill the bottom of the gaiwan. Colour. Oh, yep, we're into bronze territory there. It's really quite an intense roasting, because more so I think than on the Western, the kind of almost smoky edge is really coming through. It did on the first steeping. It's there on the cup, but balanced by sweetness. Oh, the body's up. You get the slight smokiness before the roastedness. Its flavour's lasting longer. Still a bit muddy. It's basically sweetness plus roasted and smoky notes. It's rich. There's no problem with that. I'm wondering whether our third steeping, if we keep it at that, maybe bring the water down a touch, I don't know. Let's see how much I can actually fit in. But it's going to need something, I think, just to push it along. Let's see. Yeah, that's a bit less. That's barely above 50. I'm not sure I'm got good enough eyesight to measure 55 mils by eye, but wasn't as much as the previous one. Well, again, we'll bring that in at about 30 because the drying edge has dropped off. Helps if we put the timer on. Oh dear. So maybe we need to add about 10 seconds to what this is reading, or 5 to 10. Give it a good shugle. Maximize our chances. Right, that should be 30. I would say there's some fruit coming in with that smoky quality, but it's still really, really noticeable. That's got the even darker, I would say. It's not quite iron brew, but we're getting there. As it's cooling slightly, the fruit is backing it up. Plus, there's a bit of cream actually. Otherwise, if you don't, all you're getting is the smoky quality. You've really got to just to give it an airing. Yeah. It's amazing the difference these things make. Let that cool while we... Yeah, some red fruit actually there. Leaves are still pliable, but you're going to get at least one steeping, even just to get them unfurled. Or fully steeped, shall I say. Going to cool it then. Almost buttery, actually. Slightly buttery and sweet and roasted and smoky. That's good. The flavour's still dropping off a bit, but that ester, volatile spice, fruit, that edge, that's finally come through. That's good. I'm going to finish this steeping off. Yeah. Okay. The flavour is lingering, but still not as much as it could. So hopefully this last steep at 30. Keep the water level down. I still stand by not taking this to 95 because I fear the drying would come right out if we did that. And see where this takes us. Might need to take that to 35, that's very mild. Maybe even 40 actually. I just want to get a clear picture. Yes, finally red fruit. Red fruit and smoke, that's an interesting combination. Red fruit and smoke. The colour is much the same as the previous steeping, I would say. Maybe slightly less. I'm thinking more bronze than I am iron brew this time. You're about to get the cat in shot. Right, how about you do something useful, which doesn't involve that. I'm not reshooting the whole of this section. You'll just have to cope with the cat auditioning. Yeah, there is a slightly butterscotch kind of sweet and slightly roasted quality. And some fruit. Yeah, red fruit. The point is it's not the smoke that sort of front and centre. Yeah, you could easily do a fifth. I'm not going to, but you could easily do a fifth steep on that. There it is. Creamy, roasted, smoke, some fruit, some sweet. Maybe the estery edge has dropped off, but that's all working together. I really, for time constraints, I don't want to do a fifth, but I think the fifth would be the absolute sweet spot. You're going to see the cat again. As if you needed that. Or maybe you did. I think we will call that quits there. I would say all three have responded better to Western than Gongfu. That's a lot of steeps just to hit the sweet spot. I'm not saying that they're overly fussy teas for Gongfu, I don't mean that. But there's some combination of elevated temperature, duration of steeping, to try and hit that sweet spot. The problem is that we've been chased by drying mouth and almost the limits of duration of each steep, especially for the first two, although that third one's getting slightly dry. The long and the short of it is, I reckon, having done the Gongfu, I reckon 95 for the Red Buffalo, that's the oxidized one, and the Green Heart. Maybe watch this is Western. And maybe keep the Dragon Breath, the baked one, at 90, because that really responded very nicely to Western. For the Gongfu, for these teas, it's worth it, especially if you're a practiced hand and you can, perhaps more instinctively than I can, just get the right path. Is it higher temperature? Is it more tea? Is it what's going to bring it out? It's not like the others where it's an unrewarding experience. There's a chase. There's a chase to be had here. Very well. Okay. I've really enjoyed this. This marks the end of our little mini series on Qing Xin abroad. We're going to move on to one of our regional focus series, mini series, but that's going to be a handful of videos. And then we're going to move on to a very extended one, which is for the Lishan area of Taiwan. A lot of teas to review. And hopefully we'll be able to do that before we have to move on to our 2026 teas, which are starting to come onto the market. I hope this has been of interest. It's been interesting to me, and I hope you've learned something. I certainly have. All of that said, as always, I wish you happy steeping, and God bless.